How do you retain being a child? That childhood innocence. I think that's the most important thing. If we were able to be very simple, if we realize that we really don't need much materially, and even psychologically, if we can free ourselves from our past, keep ourselves very simple, life would be so different. But as long as you start moving away from your own inner, thinking only about yourself, and you also start thinking about others. That's the step that's required. Action will follow. In fact, the idea of success and failure, which is being put out today, I think that needs to be questioned. You not only, most people think you're only successful if you have a very good career, you're earning so much money, or high position. Those are not, I would say, those are not a yardstick for success for me. Working together is important. I think that's the most important thing. How do we learn, the Karikas, how do we learn to work together? Shishukunj has made me what I am. That I must acknowledge. For me is something that must continue to exist because I think it stands for something timeless. It stands for values which are timeless.
Namaste and welcome to the next episode of the Shishukunj Legacy Podcast. And I'm really excited today because this character has travelled all the way from India to be here today for the podcast. I'm really excited to say Namaste, Tanujbhai.
Namaste, Sonalben.
Thank you so much for being here today. I've got lots and lots of questions for you, so let's just get straight in. So tell me about your journey and really about how did you start Shishukunj?
Right. So I was going to what is called the Patshala, that is these Jain classes where they would teach you Gujarati and teach you the slokas in there. And there was an uncle, Paresh, who used to go to Shishukunj, and he suggested to my parents, why don't you send them to Shishukunj? They will enjoy it, because there's a lot more activities happening than just this little bit that was happening in the Patshala. And that's how my parents sent me to Shishukunj.
And you were 9 at the time?
That's right.
9. And what were the differences between where you were and then joining Shishukunj? Were there any sort of spark differences that you noticed?
Yeah, I mean, one was, of course, the Karikas were much younger, whereas in Patshala, the people were much older who were teaching you. The connection with them, the saying, as you would go in there, they would tell you Namaste, and you connected immediately with them. I don't know what it was, but you got a sense of belonging going to that place.
And do you remember, what was your first responsibility in Shishukunj and how old were you at the time?
First responsibility, as most people would go through, would be Dastanayab. And I was around 12, I think, at that time. And I particularly remember, especially at the end of the day, you had to take Sankhya and you had to walk up. The Dastanayak would stand at the back of the line, and then they would go count the children and go to the Dastanayak, report the number of children that had come that particular day. So it felt, you really felt important. At the age of 12, you are doing something very important.
Wow. And then do you remember what your next responsibility was and how old you were roughly?
I must have gone through Dastanayak, but I can't remember the exact dates. And then, of course, Talimi Karyakar. And then, as a Talimi Karyakar, I remember in particular giving bodhiks. I really used to enjoy preparing for that and going up and giving a bodhik. I used to enjoy telling Balvarta. So, yes, it was a very gradual progression. And, it was all built into the system. So you didn't even think too much about it. But of course, becoming a Talimi Karyakar was something that you always looked forward to. Becoming a Karyakar, you felt, yes, that you'd reached a particular point in your journey there.
And is there a particular memory from that time being in Shishukunj that always remains with you? Was it a memory? Was it a particular person that inspired you?
I mean, there's lots of memories. I remember Devchandbhai coming and giving Balvarta when I was young. So that's a memory as a young person. When I was a little bit older, I remember... the shibirs in particular. And I remember Dinesh Bhai in one particular shibir where, he had gone out to do masti as people would do. And suddenly there was somebody who was caught out and he running around, jumping through the window, rolling over into his sleeping bed and sleeping and pretending that nothing had happened. So there's wonderful memories from those times.
Oh, you'll have to share some more of those on a different talk for sure.
Yeah.
So, when did you come to the UK And was there a specific reason for it?
Yeah, so I came to UK for my higher education.
Okay.
To study at a university, and at that time I remember going to Shishukunj, London during my holidays, and I used to go to Bounce Green because my cousin Atul was there, and I remember playing games, doing bal gates, bal vartas, and so on. And I remember Rohit Bhai in particular very much at that point in time.
Okay.
So yes, it was a wonderful time. So this was, while I was still in university, and then of course after I finished, I joined Brand Kendra.
Okay. What year was it that you came to London?
1984 October.
So you were in Kenya, and so you were there when the tragic news of Vallabhbhai and Devjimbai. Do you remember that date? Do you remember anything about that?
I do remember. I have vague memories. I was a bit young, so 10 years, so it's not something that's very striking for me. But I knew something, some tragedy had befallen Shishukunj, and so that's the sense I had at that time.
So it was a story that meant more to you as you became an adult, as opposed to when you were a child.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
So when you came to London, you came to do higher education. What was your higher education? What were your subjects?
I did a degree in accounting.
2 + 2 is 5.
And carried on, worked as an accountant for a few years before I changed my career and went retrained as a teacher.
Okay.
And then I started teaching mathematics.
Do you remember any differences from how Shishukunj was run in Kenya to how Shishukunj was run in London? So let's talk about Bounds Green first, and then maybe Brent, when you joined Brent after. Were there any differences that was sort of, oh my God, that's so different, apart from maybe the language?
I would probably say language was probably the only difference. Apart from that, all the other activities, things that we were doing were more or less the same.
So the values...
Yeah. And of course the weather, I must say.
Oh yes, the UK British weather will always be the thing.
Yeah, because there we would be outdoors, 365 days a year. And here, I remember in the winter, sometimes there were days when, because of snowfall or something, they say, okay, we can't have outdoor activities. We'll be indoors only today. So that was a little bit of a shock in the beginning.
I bet. So I want to talk to you about education. So I see you as an educationalist. Shishukunj has its educational wing, and they have their objectives and journeys that they want. You then took everything that you had learnt in the UK, your studies, your Shishukunj journey. There was a point in your time that you went to India. Can you tell me about how you made that decision, and then what happened when you got to India?
Right. Okay, so maybe to come to that point, I would just need to share a little bit about some events in Kenya.
Oh, please do.
We used to have what is called Bataks, which still happen now. It used to be called Budwari Batak because it used to be on a Wednesday. So during these Bataks, we had a couple of visitors pretty much within a short time who spoke about a philosopher called J. Krishnamurti. And it was quite intriguing for me to sort of hear a name so quickly, two different speakers talking about him in a very high terms. And I picked up a couple of books from the public library and started reading about him. And he sort of talked about, in some ways, there were many things that were common with Shishukunj. What it means to be a good human being, what it means to, live a life that's meaningful. And he spoke one thing in particular which changed, or two things in particular maybe. One was follow your passion, follow what you really enjoy doing. And that was the reason I changed my profession from accounting to teaching. And why education? Because I could recall the days in Shishukunj. I had so much fun being with children, and I said, right, this is what I really want to do. I want to be with children. So that was the first turning point in my life. The second point was he had started a number of schools. So being a philosopher, educationist, even one could say a religious person, but he didn't never start any ashrams, but he started schools. And there's one school in England, close to Winchester, called Brookwood Park. We worked there for 3 years, and there are 5 schools in India. And we had taken a year out, Parita and myself, and we went backpacking and we visited all these schools. And when we had visited Rishi Valley School, it had just struck us. I mean, the place was just amazing. And we said, look, we have to go back and go and work for at least 2-3 years there. And those 2-3 years have eventually turned into 22 years now.
So when you say amazing, explain amazing.
So this school is built on a 300-acre campus, surrounded by ancient rocks. The philosophy of the school is let the child be free, let the child progress in their own way. So there's a lot of freedom for children. The relationship between the teacher and the student, for example, is not like there's no authority in that relationship. It's very close, very similar to Shishukunj, how the karikas and the children sort of relate to each other. The curriculum itself, very thoughtfully designed. And in terms of, for example, I would give you a small example. Suppose you were teaching history and you talk about nationalism, which is very much part of the historical process which happened 200 years back in Europe. But the way we would do it is we would question this. Why does one need to be identified with any particular nationality? What is this whole process of identification? So through that curriculum, the questioning. So there's a lot of inquiry, a lot of questioning, about oneself, about one's relationship with the world, and what's happening outside and what's happening inside. There's a connection between the two. So that school was really opening up all that. And then, of course, there's a beautiful art and craft complex there. They have lovely assemblies, singing assemblies that we do, 3 times a week. The whole school comes and sings together, different bhajans. And it's just a beautiful context to be in.
Sounds amazing. I can see why you use the word amazing. Everything you've said there, even the whole questioning as opposed to factually, on this date this happened, on this date this happened. It's actually saying, okay, well, that happened, but why did it happen? What was the root cause of that happening? That's really interesting. I really appreciate you sharing that with me. When you look at the way of education that's happening in the school, and you look at that compared to, say, how Shishukunj teaches, are there any differences that you really think, I wish Shishukunj would do that?
Let me look at the similarities first.
Okay. Yeah. Let's do the easy part first.
See, Shishukunj provides a huge range of different experiences to the children and allows a child to really explore their inner being. And I think that's what the school where I'm teaching does, that it really allows you to find what are you really passionate about? What do you really enjoy doing? In terms of relating with people, it allows you to understand how do you relate with different people from different backgrounds. And I think in some ways Shishukunj, with its outreach programs and so on, does also allow you to see that people who are less well off than you are or come from a different background, can we understand each other better? So those are the similar things. One important area where there's a difference between Shishukunj and the school, Shishukunj, we do have something called rewards. We reward people for doing certain things. Now, in our schools, this idea of rewards and punishment, we feel it's a behavioral thing. When you sort of use rewards and punishment to shape someone's particular behavior. So we say, look, let the inner motivation be the driving force for a child, not outward extrinsic rewards. And I think that's probably the biggest difference.
Interesting. So, just for those who will be watching and listening, the rewards in London Shishukunj, could you just explain that a little more?
Right. So I remember when I was young and I dressed very well and so on. I was given a particular book for being well dressed or for doing a certain kind of thing. You were given a trophy or something, and even when you made a karikar, you're put up onto the stage. So those kind of rewards would not be there.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it like that. Thank you. I really appreciate you sharing that. One thing I wanted to also talk about was your connection with Shishukunj international projects with SIP. How did your journey how did SIP suddenly become part of your world and is still part of your world extensively? All the different organizations and schools that we have across India, Kenya, I believe Shishukunj now is in Australia, America. How did you kind of become part of that world? And why do you still want to be part of that world?
Right. In some ways, it's also sort of reflects what we're doing in the school where I am. We do have a lot of outreach activities. We cater for around 400 children from the surrounding neighborhood villages, and we educate them. We run a rural health center. So that was already happening there in the school. Now here with these Shishukunj international projects, I remember a particular seminar we had in 2006 in Indore. The Shishukunj school in Indore was just setting up, and we were discussing on how can we enlarge what we're doing as Shishukunj and do various other projects. We were already supporting many projects at that time in India, so it wasn't like things were not happening. But the question was, can we run our own projects? Can we do our own things? And one thing was, look, we're all from Gujarat. Why don't we have our own school? We have so much experience in child education, in child behavior. Why don't we start our own school in Gujarat? At that time, when this question was put, I said, this is something that cannot be done from far away. When we are, somebody has to have the ground on the feet, or we need to be connecting with people who think similarly.
Yes.
And the seeds were then laid. And then in 2009, Babubhai was also there at that seminar, and he started a school in Bangalore, Shishukunj Vidyalay. And then in 2013, Rameshbhai had come to Bhuj, and we met a group of people who thought very similar to the way we were thinking, and they had just started a small school, and they were struggling finding spaces and so on. And Rameshbhai and I said, look, now there is an opportunity for us to start a Shishukunj school. Why don't we all get together? And that's how Shishukunj International School in Bhuj has come up.
Wow. And in terms of the international projects, does that relate to the outreach work that you mentioned earlier, that Shishukunj London does, Shishukunj in India does, when it comes to the outreach projects? Is that where you were relating to, or is it a different kind of outreach? Because in London, we do help with food banks and we do send books and computers. Is that the same outreach that you were mentioning?
Yeah, so say in Bhuj, for example, we're running 4 centers in slum areas. So children who don't go to school at all, they are engaged for 4 hours every day. They're taught basic numeracy literacy, and they're given food. They're given a lot of enjoyment with singing songs and playing together. So that's one outreach. Then we're also very closely involved with a school which works in the area of special needs. And we do support them quite a bit. Recently, we bought a bus for them. Then we're associated with a school again in Kutch, which caters for girl education in particular. And it's in a very remote area where generally girls, when they reach class 8, are taken out of school and married very early. So there are a number of these kind of projects that we are closely involved with.
And from what I'm hearing, it's all about helping others, supporting others, giving them an opportunity for education, health, hygiene. Yeah. So some really core, fundamental, foundational things that you would hope every child has an opportunity to. You've just made me think about a question, coming back to your school that you are working in. Is it a school where people or parents or somebody has to pay to send their children? And the second part of that question, is it like middle class children? Is it families who are poor? Is it how does that work with the school?
Right. Yeah, no, I think that I'm glad you brought this up. So the school where we have been teaching, yes, it's a fee-paying school. Fees are quite high. We do give concessions, probably to 15 to 20% of the students. Okay. Now, the concept here is slightly different. Now we're talking about bringing about a change in society, a change in the way people think, and the way the education system runs. So we are hoping that children who move out of these schools are going to do something different with their lives. They're going to sort of, wherever they go, they're going to touch the people around them and make an impact. So it's not about, immediately, we're improving the lives of a poor kid is not what's happening. But these children, when they go out, they're going to, impact 10 people, 50 people, 1,000 people, we don't know. So many of our alumni, for example, do run schools, do run many of these outreach activities, or do something different. There's somebody who's, for example, documenting the music in Rajasthan, folk music of Rajasthan. Now that's something that's getting lost, and that's something which we feel is very valued. So they're making some value to society where it changes the way we all look at the world. So that's how we were looking at this group of people. So same thing again with Shishukunj International School, Bhuj. So it is a fee-paying school. 20 to 25% children are supported.
Okay.
But the rest, we are hoping when they go out, are going to have a bigger impact on society.
And with the school, with these outreach projects, how important do you think it is to really continue to support these projects in like today's day and age? I mean, there's so much to do, isn't it? If you look at a schedule, there's like, right, this time this, then we've got to go there, then Sunday we've got to go there. Is it still important to be doing these kind of things in today's day and age?
See, so where do we spend our time? Do we just get absorbed with our own things? It's so completely, or do we also feel that we have a bigger responsibility, and we have a responsibility to the larger world? We have, and we see, I'm sure, when people see images on TV and they're seeing it all the time, it does move them. People do feel empathy towards, people outside. And I think in some ways you start doing something different. And there are two ways in which people can do something different. There are people who completely devote their lives and, get their boots, dirty as it is on the field. And there are people who do it by finding various ways to support those people who are actually working there. And I think both are required. So one need not feel guilty that, I'm not actually there and not doing something or something that wherever you are. And again, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to think in terms of bigness largeness. You just need to think in terms of whatever small thing you can do in your immediate environment, that's good enough. But as long as you start, moving away from your own inner, thinking only about yourself, and you also start thinking about others. That's the step that's required. Action will follow.
I love that. The small, tiny steps make the big step, don't they?
Yeah.
So does the local government and like the Indian government, do they support schools like yours in India?
See, in India, it's a very different setup there, and we try to stay away from any government funding. The reason being, the moment you get government funding, you're tied down to certain kind of norms, things that you need to follow. And we want our independence to think in very different, innovative ways. So we've said no government funding.
And you did say earlier, didn't you? Was it 10 to 15%? There is kind of, if somebody needs support and help, you have that built in.
It's already there, and we want to reach towards 25%. Ideally, we would want to reach towards 25%.
Okay, so that's an ambition that you've got.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you. In Shishukunj, we have some foundation people that we often talk about. So Swami Vivekananda, Gandhiji, Maria Montessori, Tanujbhai. Do you feel those values that were brought into Shishukunj at the start of Shishukunj, do you still think they're relevant today? And is there any of that you have in your school as well in India?
Yeah, so Maria Montessori, of course, her whole approach was a child-centric approach to education. What Gijubhai did was modified Maria Montessori's approach for the Indian context. So both of them were pretty much along the same lines. And I think why child-centered now? I think that's the question we need to ask. And that's where, I go back to our school, Rishi Valley School. Krishnamurti started schools because he felt that children when they're young, are not so conditioned. Adults become highly conditioned, and to change their thinking, their behavior patterns is much more difficult. So when you're young, you're given the freedom to question, the freedom to look at life. When you're young, you look at life pretty much freshly, innocently. As you grow older, all kinds of layers starts building up. So yes, I think that's very relevant. Maria Montessori's approach, or whether it's Jiddu Krishnamurti's approach, starting with the children, where they are, not conditioning them, not putting more layers onto them. So that's very important. Now, where does Gandhiji and Swami Vivekananda come in? I would say many things Gandhiji has spoken about. The first thing is simplicity. I think that's probably the most important thing in today's world, where we're getting more and more complex in our way of looking at it. Now, if we were able to be very simple, if we realize that we really don't need much materially, and even psychologically, if we can free ourselves from our past, keep ourselves very simple, life would be so different. Swami Vivekananda, of course, this whole idea of service to mankind is service to God. That whole way and his determination to really find the truth. Swami Vivekananda started off, wanting to really understand, what is truth, what is, I really want to be directly in touch with God. That's what he had first asked that particular question.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because sometimes you look at the journey of Gandhiji or the spirit of Swami Vivekananda or Maria Montessori or Kijubai, and you kind of think, well, how relevant is that to today's society? There's so many other people, but when you actually dig deep into who they were, what their philosophies were, what their ideals were, there is something in there that I personally do think we need to bring into mainstream education, which will help children to think and feel and look at life differently. That's a task, isn't it? It's a big task to do.
Yeah. So that reminds me, we recently had a shibir in our Bhuj school, which was on Gandhiji, on Gandhiji's food, Gandhiji's clothes, and Gandhiji's house. And to understand these three aspects of Gandhiji. And on Gandhiji's food, we had a speaker who really travels around the world, talks to the universities about food security. And he said, if we had Gandhiji's idea of simplicity, the way of living, and especially food security would not be a problem for the masses if we lived differently. And he talks about,
food security. Can you explain that?
Yeah. So food security, in today, half the world's population do not have access to 3 meals a day, right? In today's world.
Okay.
And the other half, which does, has much, much more. And there's a huge amount of wastage, right? So he talks about the way the supermarkets function, the way the sell-by dates work, the way they work with the farmers, the way the farmers are asked to produce certain kinds of products, and which are sometimes, if they don't fit what the supermarkets want, then they are just go wasted. So he talks about the whole global economy, and he says the problem is if we lived simply, locally, then food security would not be a problem. Okay. So each of these elements, if you really think, of what Gandhiji has said, is really connected to what is happening in the world today.
Wow. This might be a difficult question, but I'm going to ask it.
Yeah.
If you had to pin down who your inspiration in Shishukunj has been, who would that be?
Gosh, so I don't think there's only one person we can pin down. There's a huge number. I mean, of people who you've passed through and at each stage there's different inspiration. When you're a child, and when you're in the middle years, and when you're older, as somebody or the other. But I'll just talk about the few people who are still working in London Shishukunj, because I don't want to leave out names. It's very easy to leave out names. You miss out because there's such a large number of names that are there. But when you talk about the two Rameshbhais, for example, very different personalities, both of them, and great things to learn from both of them. Rameshbhai Patel is really the bedrock of Shishukunj, and has been there right from the beginning. His energy, his enthusiasm, the way he, multi-talented. Rameshbhai Ruda, again, great commitment, goes around connecting people to Shishukunj. And I've had the opportunity to see him when I was 10-year-old, and I used to enjoy the Bal Sabha items that he used to do. And now I have the opportunity to work with him for the Bhuj school, and I see that kind of energy he still has at the age of 65. That's amazing. Then we have people like Bharat Pai, who really helps sort out issues, communicates really calmly, and a great intellectual. We have Harish Pai, who's always working in the background. You would never know, but you know, if you tell him something, things will get done.
Yes.
We have Dinesh Pai. Again, you know, he comes to Bangalore Shishukunj, he comes to Bhuj, holds shibis for us, helps us wherever we are required. So, you know, all these people in some ways have been great inspiration. And then there have been my peers, people like Ketan Bhai Damani, Manish Bhai, who also, I see, you know, I've learned a lot from all these people. So there's a huge number of people. And then, of course, people lower down also. So I'm sorry if I'm going to leave out some names, but there's a huge number of people who I've been inspired.
So we finished that off with, and everyone else who's inspired you in Shishukunj. There you go. That covers everyone. I want to ask you this question, and I want to ask this question in a way so that I'm looking at London Shishukunj, and I'm also looking at the school that you run, as well as international Shishukunj. Society is changing. People are talking more openly about gender equality and diversity. You know, we talk about the LGBTQ society. Do you think, as an organisation, Shishukunj, your school, international projects, are we open to this, or are we still in a place of early learning? And if we are still in a place of early learning, what can we do to help this journey along? Because it's happening.
Right. So you're talking about inclusiveness.
Absolutely.
How inclusive is Shishukunj? How inclusive is the school where I'm working? How inclusive is our projects?
Yes.
I think at one level, say in terms of people who are physically challenged, I see Shishukunj has really helped. Shishukunj London, I've seen, has helped quite a number of people. Our projects, which Shishukunj International projects, do reach out to many of these. As I spoke about the special needs school we are working with.
Yes.
Similarly, you know, in our school in Rishi Valley, we do look at helping people from different economic backgrounds, helping people from different gender identities and so on. But what I think we need to be careful with is that we do not get caught out with just one particular thing. There's a huge amount of things that's happening.
Yes.
There's a lot of exploitation that's happening in the world, a lot of inequalities, a lot of injustice. So how do we find a way in which we are balanced? I think that's important.
Agreed.
That all these things are important. And how do we not find our way, ourselves in a position where we exclude certain things? So that's where our constitution comes in, you know. We don't look at creed, caste, color, religion, you know. So maybe a few more things can be added now to the constitution. But I think that's important, that wherever we are helping people, we're not looking from, that we are only helping people from only a particular caste, or we're only helping people from a particular background. We're there wherever help is required. I think that's important.
Agreed. And I think that's really important that you said about kind of opening that window, not just half opening it, fully opening the window. No, I think that's a really good way of kind of explaining that. So, Tanujbhai, with the number of years that you've been in Shishukunj, as you've shared earlier, from the age of 9, there's always been this theme about we don't have enough workforce, things are really hard to do, they don't want to get involved. Have you felt that? Do you have anything you want to share about the struggling workforce?
Yeah. So I would say it's a question, it's an eternal question. It was there when I was there in the 70s. A lot of people were migrating to UK. Suddenly there weren't enough karyakars. So they looked for solutions. At that time, I remember instead of 4 kendras, we made 2 kendras plus a Yuvak Kendra. In the Yuvak Kendra, and I was part of that Yuvak Kendra, there was a lot of inputs, training which went, and that produced a large number of karyakars. Again, the 2 kendras at that time really thrived. I remember at one point we had sankhyas which were approaching 400 on each kendra. So, that was, of course, the golden age of Nairobi Shishukunj. And so I would say that never get depressed by those facts. You want to do some work, you want to create something, just look for solutions, look for things, and there are enough good people in the world who will come and contribute to this. As long as we have faith in what we are doing, I don't think we need to get too worried about the workforce. Yes, we need to look for solutions, and we need to see what's visible in this time. As I said, from 4 kendras to 2 kendras was a solution at that time. It could have become 4 kendras again very easily with the kind of sankhyas we had. So the debates are important. Working together is important. I think that's the most important thing. How do we learn, the karyakas, how do we learn to work together? How do we develop that? It's there. There's a certain understanding. One thing I noticed, Shishukunj karyakar, when they go to a wedding to help, everyone knows their role. Everyone knows what to do. Nobody has to be told, right? And they're so hands-on. Absolutely. And I think that's Shishukunj spirit.
Yeah.
So if we can bring that in everything that we do, and just let our ego take a backstage, let there be more humility. I say we would be able to move mountains.
Absolutely. And I think we just need to stop thinking about age 12, you can do this.
Yeah.
Because these days, 8, 9-year-olds have the knowledge and experience. And if you just give them a little bit of a confidence boost, they can also do some of the things where workforce, it's deemed to be struggling. If you had to give a message to the children of today, a message that would help them to grow and really follow their passions. I'm probably answering some of what you're going to say, but to grow as them as individuals. When I look at you and the story you told me of like your journey from 9 years old, what would that message be so that they can really become, as we say in Shishukunj, good citizens of tomorrow?
One is, how do you retain being a child, the childhood innocence? I think that's the most important thing. How does one retain that childhood? Because when you're young, you do question many things. You do see injustice very quickly. You do see that, you're quickly able to point out this is right, this is wrong. As we grow older, we sort of somehow become a little bit bourgeois and less-bring, and we want our own comforts. So how can we retain that, and find a way where we're not just thinking about our own comforts? I think that's important, and a sense of being, of course, anchored in certain values. And I think certain values, I would say probably the most important value is humility. How do we find ourselves to be humble enough so that our ego doesn't take over? We don't feel like we have to become something. We have to show off. We have to demand certain respect from society, or so on. So there's so many things. In fact, the idea of success and failure, which is being put out today, I think that needs to be questioned. You're not only, most people think you're only successful if you have a very good career, you're earning so much money, or high position. Those are not, I would say, those are not a yardstick for success for me. Yardstick for success for me is, how humble are you? How open are you? When you see something which is unjust, do you go out and help people? Do you respond to things you see?
Thank you. And I know from a London perspective, parents today, they're either both working, they're busy, they've got bills to pay. What message would you want to give to the parents who not only have a busy lifestyle, but also have what I call a target-driven, get good grades way of life?
It's the most simple thing I would like to tell parents is, please don't project your desires onto your children. Let them be. Let the children grow naturally. Let them grow in freedom. They may not be successful in terms of what you may think, but let them be what they want. Because, the moment you start imposing your ideas onto the children, you're going to lose them.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And then there's a question around, we've got all these, Talimi Garikas, senior Garikas. What's the message to them?
I'm glad you asked this question. I would say the most important thing is how can we work together? The moment we start working together, if that feeling is there, we can move mountains, really. And I think to get there, again, all the things I spoke earlier, especially how do we work with humility, simplicity? If we really learn to do those things, we will be able to move mountains. Just see things as they are. Let's not project on ourselves of becoming something. I think that's what stops us from really being ourselves.
I love that answer. Thank you, Tanujbhai. Tanujbhai, 9 years old. Tanujbhai today.
Yeah.
What does Shishukunj really mean to you?
Shishukunj has made me what I am. That I must acknowledge. The career I've chosen, the people I've met, the kind of what I've observed, the way the Karikas have been, and all that has gone into what I am today. So I would say, yes, Shishukunj for me is something that must continue to exist. It must continue to inspire younger children because I think it stands for something timeless. It stands for values which are timeless. And though we have a context, now I think this is where we need to make a little bit of distinction. When we started Shishukunj, the context was a migrant community which had moved out of India. It wanted to retain those cultural values, and it was a very much a Gujarati-based institution. When we came to England, the same concerns were there, but we were moving a little bit further away, especially since children were going to a school where different set of values, different ways of approaching things were coming in. So language may have got diluted, but I don't worry about that. That's not the crucial thing. I think the crucial things are the values. Now, of course, it's in an Indian context. So I feel even in today's world, for example, Shishukunj can even invite non-Gujaratis, for example, Tamilians, Kannadigas and Malayalis and so on. So if you remember, Babubai went to Bangalore, Kannada speaking, and he started a Shishukunj there. So it's not big, you're not limited by having to be in Gujarat to create a Shishukunj. Or similarly in Limuru, Danilbhai has created Limuru Nursery and Martha and all those people working there have Shishukunj values. So I think the values are the crucial bits.
Yeah.
Of course, Indian stories help. Because we have a huge range of the Jataka tales and the fables and the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, and we listen. But I think in today's context, we also need to look at them more critically. See, one aspect, for example, if you look at the Mahabharata, people were not all angels. Krishna, right? He told Arjun, look, go and kill Karna when he was trying to get the chariot out. Yudhishthira, he lied. He said, Ashwatthama, the elephant is died, but he didn't really say the elephant. Yeah. So, though they had certain characters, they also had character flaws. And I think we need to understand that, and we need to look at that in a particular way. Because unfortunately, what's happening today, in today's world, is Indian culture is being projected as the perfect thing. Yeah. And, if you, just say Shri Ram, then, that's good enough. And that's not Indian culture. In fact, Indian culture today has become very westernized. If you go to India today, you find there's no difference between an Indian and they're thinking about their careers and their progression, and a person in England thinking about it. Both are very materialistic. So I think Indian culture has got very diluted today. Yep.
Tanujbhai, thank you so much. It's been really interesting talking to you. I mean, we've gone from Kenya, age 9, to London, to Bangalore, to Bhuj, Shishukunj. I feel like we've just had a little journey, and so much information that you shared. Namaste, and thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you, Sonu.